in Denver, Colorado, and he is starting a cooperative that will do regenerative gardening in people's lawns. So it's kind of landscaping. They want to focus on food production. Not all of it maybe will be food production, but it will definitely be regenerative. So turning lawns into thriving ecosystems, sinking carbon, creating ecosystems for insects, pollinator insects. And that was great for the environment, and it's also great for people because you can have a lawn that is beautiful and generating food, and you can be in nature all the time. So that's what we're working on. And we are inviting you all to join us. So we are live streaming right now on 3 different platforms. We are on YouTube, we are on Twitch, and we are on Facebook. So you can watch us on any of those platforms. You can watch the reruns on YouTube. You can get caught up on this. I also post clips on there. And you can join the conversation. So we've got chat rooms on YouTube and Twitch, and there's comments on Facebook. So if you're out there right now, I've got my chat room open right here. I can see if you post a comment, and please just speak up if you're there. I don't know if anyone's there, so let me know if you're there. If you have any questions or suggestions or feedback for us, just shoot it our way. And yeah, throughout, we haven't had a lot of people joining us yet, so I haven't been like pausing a whole lot, but if I know people are there, then I'll try to pause a bit more and make sure to give you space to give us input. So what we're talking about today is structure. We're on the structure of the organization. So as you will see underneath me, there's my Regenerative Enterprise Design Workbook. That is just a list of questions that I've been asking David. And we talked about his purpose and vision, and value proposition, and market and delivery, and financial goals. And now we're talking about structure. And over the last time, we filled out this bullet, this diagram looks like a bullseye, and we talked about the different levels of engagement, or the different kind of roles that people would fill in the organization. So there's homeowners, who would be customers, who would be having their lawns landscaped. There would be cooks and gardeners. So we've got the gardeners who are doing landscaping work, and then we also have cooks who would be involved to cook any excess food and sell it. He wants that to be a part of it. And then we have role holders, people who have been either assigned or elected to a role, and they would have duties to perform. And then in the very center, we have board members. So we're talking about making this a cooperative. So they would be elected to the board of directors. So that's what we talked about last time. And we talked about how it would be funded with a percentage of the fees, and that he also wants to do some crowdfunding here initially to get things going. So that's kind of where we left off. And what we are going to talk more about today is about the roles that would be in the organization. So before we just dive into that, let's just hear from David how he's doing right now. How are you doing, David?
I am doing very well today. Thank you.
Awesome. Great.
Beautiful, but very dry here.
Thanks. Yeah, and I didn't mention that I'm in Norman, Oklahoma. So he is in Colorado, I'm in Oklahoma. But we're working on this together. I invite anybody else who wants to be involved to get involved. All right, so yeah, let's jump in here at roles. What are some of the initial roles that you'd be looking at, either filling yourself or getting other people to fill?
The roles. So there's a coordinator type role that works with gardeners trying to find new clients, works with clients trying to find new gardeners, works with the organization to develop policies and procedures on how all of this is going to happen. Maybe a coordinator role. Then there is the overseeing the bookkeeping and accounting and paying the bills and So a treasurer role, so maybe a president and a treasurer. Then maybe the secretary role, I suppose, is still keep track of things. We would want a role in terms of, I'm not exactly sure how to express this, but product development type role. What are best practices in terms of utilizing materials that are generated on site, bringing in new materials. Part of the process would be finding the species that fit into a pollinator garden or a herb garden or a culinary herbs or medicinal herbs or a food forest type garden. And being able to coordinate the propagation of those plants and making sure that they're available for the gardeners.
Yeah. Yeah, we had talked about guilds, like kind of developing guilds.
Right.
Yeah, that would be available. Like here's a pollinator garden, design or set of plants that could be put in.
So I think the organization wants to invest in research and development in that regard to do a survey of all the gardeners, all the gardens that we have built that are called pollinator gardens, and which ones are the most effective, which plants best fit into a pollinator garden. We have guidance for the gardeners going forward.
Yeah.
And the home says, I want a pollinator garden.
Yeah, and they could also do pricing, like find the best place to get those things. Sourcing and pricing.
Yeah, and although we'd like to do, so a lot of these plants will become overgrown wherever you plant them, and they need divided, and then we'd like all those plants to be available for new gardens throughout the community.
Sure, yeah, you could just propagate the ones from existing gardens. Yeah, totally. It's a good idea. Cool. Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good list. So I had mentioned last time that I think it's a good idea to keep the roles of the board separate from the managerial roles. So like typically a president, treasurer, and secretary, those would be, board roles. And I mean, even though it could be the same people filling those roles, that like putting on a different hat, I think is a good idea. Because really the board doesn't have that many decisions it needs to make, and they don't really need to meet all that often for a cooperative. And I've just seen weird things happen, like with cooperatives, where if the board's doing all of the work, they don't want to like give that up or something. Excuse me. But yeah, the president, I mean, really, typically a president, what they like facilitate meetings?
Sure. And so the organization is going to be, all the decision making will be out at the edges, because it is really about the gardener's decision to provide this particular service for this homeowner at this time. And we don't want any kind of central control over what those decisions are being made. That's between the homeowner and the gardener. We would need some sort of a back channel for all the homeowners that are dissatisfied with their gardener, that we can give some support or change out the gardeners or do something to keep the homeowner happy. But the day-to-day affairs, in terms of the actual work, that should all be done without any kind of input from the center.
Right.
So what's happening at the center then is developing systems to support the gardeners in their work. And providing that value to the gardeners and having the gardeners appreciate that value and want to support it from the center. So, and pay for it.
Right. So keeping in mind that we want to keep these roles minimal. Yeah, I still want to list what the accountabilities are and what the domains are. So what they are responsible for delivering that is measurable. I like to make sure that these things are measurable, and then what they have the power to make decisions over without having to get approval from anyone else.
Right. So with that caveat that the day-to-day decisions are actually done by the people doing the work, then you want to have these roles that we talked about to make sure that the money coming in is accounted for properly, that the checks are written and the gardeners get paid for the work they did, that the research and development goes on, and that the gardeners have a way to express what they need, and the organization is responsive to fulfilling those needs. So what you name that role, I mean, you could have a chief executive officer that's a member of the board that doesn't actually do anything day to day, or you could you could have a different person or a different role for that person, where they are fielding the correspondence from the gardeners on a daily basis, and talking to the people that are actually providing the services for the gardener, and making sure that those things all happen appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, a CEO, that's a little bit of a in between, because the CEO typically actually does go to board meetings. I'm not even that familiar with some other decision-making structures other than sociocracy and holacracy that I've been using for a while. But I mean, that we call it the lead link, and the lead link is a member of the board, and they're also a member of the general company circle or the executive team, because you want that link between the board and the top, executive team. So yeah, you want them to go to, communicate and collect information and bring it back.
Right.
Yeah. So that is kind of the link between the two, which could be part of that coordinator role that we mentioned. Would that be the same, or would that be different, you think?
I think that's probably what we're talking about is, right. So it's a question of what you're going to name it, but the person who is charged with making sure things are running smoothly.
Sure. Yeah, I think, coordinator's a good name for that. And then the other board members would be president, treasurer, and secretary. I mean, you really don't need more than that. I say don't overcomplicate it unless there's a reason to. So yeah, and I don't even know. Different decision-making structures are different. Does your coordinator have voting power on the board, or are they just going to meetings to communicate with the board? What do you think? I mean, you can decide.
I would give them a voting power, or maybe just a voting power if the board can't agree, or there's some sort of stalemate or split on the board.
Yeah, if you had an odd number of seats on the board, like just a president, treasurer, and secretary, then they probably wouldn't be, unless somebody's missing, unless one of your board members is out of commission, then maybe the coordinator could be the tiebreaker.
Something like that. But then you've only got certain decisions that the board is going to make, which is, authorizing a fundraising campaign, or selling an asset, or I'm not exactly sure what you would assign to the board. Change to the structure of the organization.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to remember for Colorado. It varies state to state, the exact rules for a cooperative, but I think to edit the bylaws, it actually takes a vote of the entire membership. I seem to remember that. I could be wrong, though. The board definitely, one thing they do is set a budget, because they're kind of responsible for ensuring that the organization, is fiscally responsible and isn't going into debt.
Well, to borrow money, that would be a good one to include in the board.
Yeah, yeah. Which isn't really a domain of any particular role. It's a domain of the board in general. So let me just put that down here. I'll just give the board its own accountabilities and domains. So yeah, I've just got each role, and then under that I've got accountabilities and domains. So I'm trying to make a list. So accountabilities of the board would be fiscal responsibility. And so the domain of that would be an annual budget, including like maximum spending caps. So they would approve some sort of annual budget. Don't spend more than this because we can't afford to, right? Yeah. And then, they would review that at least every quarter. That's kind of majority of what the board does. And they would also be like legal responsibility. So they would have to make sure that like you're not breaking any laws. Right? So, I mean, if you were going to kind of take those things, is there any kind of other large things other than like legal and fiscal responsibility that the board is responsible for?
Are they going to, well, we have to decide, are they going to appoint the role holders that are on the next level down to doing the actual business, or are those also going to be elected by the members?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. Typically, how most organizations do it is that the board just hires the CEO, and then the CEO hires everybody else on the C-suite, that top team, and then they, filter down and hire people underneath them. That's typically how it's done. I mean, there's something to be said for that, because then you're kind of taking responsibility for, this person has, you have that whole like boss structure. Without the boss structure, you have more of a situation like our democracy where like elected officials are responsible to the entire population. We can kind of see how well that's working. In a small group, it's different though. In a small group, it's a little different. But how big is this organization going to
get? We can always dream. 1,000 gardeners and 20,000 homeowners.
Mm-hmm.
So 1,000 gardeners, I still think you can have the person who is going to coordinate, have that be an elected position rather than appointed by the board. But maybe at some point you'd want to hire professionalism of some scale,
mm-hmm.
as opposed to somebody who comes up through the ranks and understands how the organization works.
Yeah, so like the crop cooperative that owns Organic Valley and Organic Prairie, I believe the way they do it is they have like regional teams, and I think that they do elect like regional representatives that kind of are in charge of their region. So that kind of makes sense looking at it that way. I'm thinking. Yeah, so you might have like a major coordinator who kind of coordinates between everybody, and then you might have like a regional coordinator who just multiple regional coordinators who coordinate in the physical area where it would make sense for people to like have in-person meetings and share resources, right?
Well, so if you divided your gardeners into pods based on region or something,
mm-hmm.
And then each of them elected a representative to a central council that worked directly with the coordinator, maybe it's that council that elects the coordinator.
I'm liking how you're thinking. I'm really liking that.
And so there would be the first of equals or something. Somebody that agrees to take on the role of facilitator, coordinator, rather than a decision-making role.
Okay. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to write this down, because like there's the initial where they're probably just going to have one coordinator, but then there's the eventual situation where you might have these multiple local coordinators who would elect a regional coordinator or a company-wide coordinator. So let's see. Initially, that coordinator, are you saying, so initially, if you only have one region, would that coordinator then be elected by the gardeners?
Well, so if we had 10 gardeners and a role to play in terms of coordination, then I think our 10 gardeners could decide who's going to play that role. When you're at 500, maybe you want to divide them up by region.
Okay.
And if you had 10 regions, then 10 people get together representing each of the regions, and then they would determine. I mean, that's the way I see it happen. We don't have to make that decision for the gardeners.
Okay.
But
okay, I'll put if gardeners are operating in multiple regions, they each elect a regional coordinator, and regional coordinators elect a company-wide coordinator. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I mean, by the time you get to that point, you'll have this organization formed, and those gardeners can have more say in that. But it sounds like a good idea, and starting out with them electing the coordinator, if that's the direction you're going, makes sense.
To me, and then, maybe it makes sense. I can't imagine a situation where they'd prefer, like our regional transportation district just elected to bring in a new director they're going to pay her $350,000 because of her expertise in running transportation organizations. I don't think we're going to be in that situation. I think we want to promote people from inside who actually know how this particular organization runs.
Yeah. And I mean, talking to the audience here, we are organizing a community-based organization. So this isn't like you typically think of a company. He's talking about operating this whole thing on 5% of income going to the organization as a whole. So if you were going to hire a coordinator, you'd probably have to charge more than that. So it makes more sense if the coordinator is actually someone who is one of the members, who's one of these gardeners, who just gets elected into that position. Because they're probably not going to get paid, or at least not very much.
Yeah, it depends on what kind of services we can deliver through that central organization.
Yeah.
And how much value it is to the gardeners, but I'm not exactly sure how that's all going to develop.
Yeah, but at least initially, it's not like this is a $50,000 a year job. This is like, yeah, you might get some kickbacks, maybe, but yeah, we definitely don't have the money to start paying like a full-time person to be doing this work. So yeah, it would make more sense. And I think we even mentioned talking about maybe all of the gardeners need to pitch in some way, helping out with logistics, and that holding one of these roles could be one option of how they could, do that. Maybe marketing could be one way. Everybody could just pitch in a little bit.
Right. So yeah, a labor requirement.
Yeah. Exactly, instead of charging more. So, I mean, this is kind of the thing with a cooperative. I mean, it's there to serve the members, and we're talking about how the profits are paid out in a cooperative. If you don't have preferred shares, if you don't have shareholders who are just trying to make an income off of it, which you don't need to have in a cooperative, then it doesn't really matter if you pay out profits at the end of the year or not, because if you don't, then you're just giving more value or more money to your members throughout the year. It's going to come back to them either way. Like REI gives their members a 10% refund at the end of the year. Well, why not just give members a 10% discount? it's the same thing, right? You're going to get the value either way. So whether they have to, volunteer for, 4 hours a month to help out the organization, or whether they have to pay another 5% of their money, doesn't really, I mean, it's up to them which one they would rather do, but it's kind of the same amount of value either way.
Can you hear that?
I can. What is that?
That's my phone.
Uh-oh.
There.
Okay.
There it went.
Okay.
I might cut it off, but it's on the other side of the room now.
Okay. So starting with that coordinator position, their accountabilities would be communicating between the board and the members, right?
Right.
And also communicating or coordinating communication. Would they be really doing much to coordinate communication between the members with each other, and also then between the members with the customers? Like, how much of that would they be coordinating?
So there is the new homeowner coming in, needing services, connecting with gardeners. There is new gardeners coming in and getting some sort of certification that they are competent to take on homeowners and do this work. There is maybe a tool sharing type arrangement where we need all the wheelbarrows on this weekend, and who has them now, and how do we get a hold of them? That's the type of thing I see as being the responsibility, or something that could be of value to the organization if somebody's willing to take on that role.
Okay. So coordinating communication between the members, specifically, you were saying around sharing like tools or sharing resources. They probably wouldn't have to actually, like be there for each piece of communication, but making sure that there is some like, online forum, maybe moderating that forum, just making sure that the communication is happening and it's happening smoothly. Does that make sense?
You're responsible for knowing what's going on and helping those people who don't have all that knowledge, right?
Sure. And there might be, like new people like, wait, how do I find out about this? Oh, go to this forum, that kind of thing. Yeah. And then connecting new homeowners with gardeners. So people would just like contact the organization saying, I want to have gardening. And that person would just make sure that that gets routed to the right people to find them a match. Cool. Yeah. And they probably wouldn't even have to do all that work themselves. Just make sure it gets done.
Correct.
Right. Accountabilities. Yes. Okay. And then domains, we mentioned tie breaking for decisions of the board. Would they be able to make decisions about things like those forums? Like, oh, this forum is not working. We need a different kind of software. Could they just make that decision and say, hey, we're going to change the way these forums work because I'm moderating it and it's not working?
Well, it's sort of like they should certainly have the authority to try new things.
Mm-hmm.
If you have something up and running, perhaps you want an advice and consent type of approach before you make big changes for things that other people are already relying on. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I'm not exactly sure how to express that limitation on, forcing everybody to use a single channel of communication creates its own set of problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, people can always call or text each other directly, but I do think, if somebody's in charge of coordinating it, they should be able to do that. And if something isn't working at all for them, then I think they should be able to change it. I mean, I've always been kind of stubborn about this. Like, I was the treasurer of my housing co-op, and I was like, look, I'm going to pick what software I use. I'm going to pick how we divvy up the bills because I'm doing the work. If you don't like it, you do it. Right? Especially when it's a volunteer position. I think that's especially important. I think this is why a lot of volunteer organizations end up burning people out, is because they don't connect responsibilities and privileges. Like they expect people to do all this work, but then they don't give them any decision-making power or reward that is equal to that. So people end up feeling like they're just being taken advantage of and they don't have any power. Does that make sense?
Avoid that.
Yeah. So I think it's good to give people a little bit of power with whatever responsibilities you're putting on them. At least enough to do their own job. So yeah, trying out different systems, communication systems, maybe getting the consent of everybody to totally change over, but at least, hey, we're going to try this out now.
Sure. So then they're also coordinating the people who are depositing the funds and writing the checks. And they can work with them in terms of what kind of accounting software we want to use.
Yeah, well, we have the bookkeeper role too. So maybe we could put the financial stuff on the bookkeeper so that one person isn't doing everything.
Correct.
So yeah, let's do the bookkeeper then. So accountabilities would be, accounting for the money, right?
That's right.
For money. Facilitating transactions. Probably financial reporting.
Sure.
To membership and the board.
Right. What total amount, profit and loss on a quarterly basis, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Income and expense.
Yep. Okay. So they have to keep all of the records up to date. They have to make sure the transactions are happening, and then they have to give that, quarterly or monthly report. Okay. And then domains, would you give them the power to decide what accounting software they use?
Sure. I mean, if they or we might decide to hire out, right? That might be worth worth paying a fee to make sure that it's done properly and not subject to the skills of somebody that we just pulled out of the gardener ranks.
Yeah. I think that's broad enough. Choosing the accounting system includes how they collect the information, how they put together those reports. I mean, the board can say, hey, we need an itemized list of this, but kind of the bookkeeper could decide how they, if they're going to use Microsoft Word or if they're going to use Open Office. It's kind of up to them the exact way that they do that. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else about the bookkeeper role that we missed?
I'm not sure. I mean, there's a projection, or is it worthwhile to invest in this service because the gardeners are going to be willing to pay for it? This operation is going to differ from a typical cooperative or business organization in the goal of investing in the capacity to provide for the members those things that they need, those things that can allow them to reduce their cost of living, which is the food, shelter, learning, health, belonging, and purpose. So you've got a planning type or a scenario type job where you have to look at, if we spent the money in this way, we can save our gardeners this amount of money, and that justifies them making this larger contribution or this investment into the organization. And that's going to be a tricky one, actually. And maybe that's a different role. I don't know.
That might be the treasurer role. So we got like bookkeeping is more just like, record keeping, whereas the treasurer might be more the one who does the research of investment opportunities, or at least considers that, research and consider investment opportunities. I'd say that's an accountability of the treasurer. Because, kind of new investments is a board level decision. I mean, little expenditures, day-to-day expenditures is more like an operations decision. But, we're going to start spending money on this totally new thing. Usually that's more of a board decision.
Well, or so at what scale can we start offering health insurance?
Yeah, exactly. That'd probably be a board decision. So at least at the scale we're talking about. Okay, so then product development. So this product developer, they are designing guilds. They're researching pricing and sourcing. I'd say researching and communicating. Because, it doesn't really help if they do the research if they don't share it.
Right. Well, and so the research is data collection, an analysis of how closely our gardens are coming to fulfilling the goals of creating habitat, increasing the amount of soil carbon, those types of goals.
Okay. Researching and communicating. Researching and communicating. I kind of want to say like broader than just plants. Research and communicating like resources or something. How would you put that?
Well, so it's best practices in terms of enhancing the environment, right?
Best practices. That's what That's what I'm talking about. Okay. Yeah. Designing guilds, researching and communicating pricing and sourcing, and researching and communicating best practices.
Right.
Anything else that product developer would do?
I mean, that's the goal, is to have all of our gardeners have access to the best information we have about doing their job properly.
Cool. And then domains. I mean, they get to decide what they research to some extent, at least, right?
Or how they're going to go about their research. We're going to survey all of the pollinator gardens this year and see if we can itemize. I don't know exactly what you can itemize, but itemize the variety of plants and how well they do in different configurations.
Yeah, cool. Decide what to research and how to research. All right. Okay, so then, back to the board now. Keeping in mind that overall the board is responsible for fiscal responsibility, legal accountability, and then also, so they're not going to hire anybody. Is that right? Because the coordinator position, or would they hire a bookkeeper?
Well, they could hire a bookkeeper with the advice and consent of the coordinator, maybe.
I mean, the board's going to be elected by the same people as well.
Right. But they have the ultimate responsibility of the purse strings, right? So we're going to
hire a bookkeeper. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to just have the bookkeeper be a hired position, because I mean, you just need somebody who has those skills. It's not going to be a big, effect on the gardeners who's doing the bookkeeping necessarily.
No, and so you want the best value for the dollar.
Yeah, I think it's going to have more effect on the board because they're like directly reliant on getting those reports. Yeah, and then what about the product developer person? How did they get their position?
Well, to begin with, we could elect them. Eventually, you could have people apply for that position based upon their research skills, perhaps. So somebody that comes out of an environmental science division of some local university, maybe.
But what do you think you would still have the members then kind of like vote on, like maybe you have 3 candidates and have them vote on which one becomes the product developer, or would you let the board just hire that person? What do you think?
If it's going to be a professional position, maybe you do want to assign that to the board. I'm not.
Up to the gardeners once they, do they want to have to deal with that? It might be, up to them. So, okay, yeah, we're not quite sure, right? And I'll just put hire bookkeeper and possibly product developer.
Right.
Yeah.
Or, hire professional services so they could decide if we need legal advice, which law firm we're going to use.
Okay. Hire professional services. That it could or could not include your own roles. Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then the domains would be to approve the annual budget. Anything else?
Well, the annual budget and then major contracts, I suppose. Yeah, like the hiring people is kind of both a domain and accountability. In a way, like you're responsible to do it and you also have the power to do it. Hire people or professional services. Okay. And then the board. Yeah. I think it would be a good idea to have the entire membership vote on changes to the bylaws, because that could totally change how the organization operates. So I wouldn't give that power to the board. Yeah, I mean, the board really doesn't do much. I've been on a board before. I mean, I just remember mostly talking about the budget. Right. And of course, the board that I was on also did more labor than they should have. But I think talking about the budget was the main thing that we were messing with and hiring people. Okay. So then the president. So the president wouldn't necessarily have to facilitate all the meetings. Like if the treasurer happened to be a better facilitator, they might pass it off. But I think the president is responsible for making sure that the board meetings are facilitated. Okay, sure. And so those are more statutory positions, right? Certain things require that the president sign off on them, that the treasurer sign off on them, that the secretary sign off on them. Secretaries, we're doing them step by step, but yeah, there's the statutory requirements of the organization.
Yeah, so signing off on legal documents probably would apply to all of these board members. And then on top of that, I mean, it's mostly just about having the meetings. Like the secretary would probably call the meetings and take notes during the meetings, right?
And then they'd receive reports from the operating role players, and and then their job would be to call a halt to anything illegal or that was going to lead to financial ruin, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so the treasurer would receive and deliver the financial reports at the meetings. They'd be the one who says, look, this is how much money we're making, according to our bookkeeper. Yeah. That's pretty much it. So yeah, and then domains, not much specifically that I can think of, other than like the secretary gets to maybe decide how they take notes and how they distribute them. Like, there's not really that much that the secretary specifically has powers over, other than what the board in general has power over. Can you think of anything?
No, it's that responsibility of making sure that the decisions of the board are recorded.
Yeah, and that's more of a responsibility, not like a power, a decision-making power. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they mainly just have the decision, the power to vote. Yeah, on whatever the board as a whole needs to make decisions on. So I'll just put voting under all of these domains. Because, yeah, these three people are probably just going to vote on most things. Management is more where you end up delegating things more than voting, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, and let me look back up at the top here for a second. I'm just saying if there's anything that those other roles would have the power to delegate. I mean, other than just pieces of their own role, like if the product developer wanted help, they could ask for help with their research. That's kind of a given. Yeah, I don't think we need to specify anymore. Okay, yay. Are there any other roles you can think of? We just have 3 management roles and 3 board roles.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, as the organization becomes larger, they may find new roles, but that should be plenty to start with.
Awesome. Yay. Let me underline those words so we know these are different sections. Okay. Yay. That's awesome. Okay, so next question. Okay, so as for like how the workers make decisions amongst themselves, what kind of decision-making structure do you think they would use?
So they're going to be working on each individual gardener has responsibility for his clients, his or her clients.
Okay.
And the responsibility to ask for help from other gardeners to the extent that there's more than just the 4 hours a month going on. So if the homeowner then says, in addition to the 4 hours per month, we would like this garden, and we'll buy the materials, you guys bring in the labor, then that gardener would want a mechanism to reach out to other gardeners to say, this is the labor I need for this project. This is how we're going to divide up the money this is how the bidding process that we're going to go through to tell the homeowner this is what we're going to charge for it. So that's how I see these little pods coming up that are then going to be, is that gardeners within a particular area of the town would work together on these larger projects.
Okay. And
develop their own internal way of organizing that and making the decisions about that.
Okay. I would say it would be good to give them kind of a default starting point. And I'd say probably at that starting point would be whichever gardener got the contract, whose ever client it is, that they would be the team leader. They could decide, hey, we're going to make decisions democratically in this team. But I think it's good to say, somebody's in charge of this team. So it's not complete chaos, right?
And so then let me put on a slight different variation on that. So then the homeowner says, I would like a chicken coop built. And among all the gardeners, there is this team that is really good at building chicken coops, and they have already got all their pricing and the tools and the procedures on how it's going to go about. So they have that decision making in the bidding for that particular service. And then what we would do is a decision making on the role of the gardener that brought that work to that team, right? So that they can participate in the work. They have a certain share in the profits from that work. They have a design parameter input into how that chicken coop's going to fit into this homeowner's yard. Those types of things.
Yeah. So it seems like the team could be formed around either like a contract, because if it were a unique contract and there wasn't a team formed to do that kind of thing yet, then it probably would be whoever got the contract that would organize that team, right? But if you had a team that was organized around a particular activity like building greenhouses, then that team would already have kind of their own structure. They'd form around who knows the most around building greenhouses. Maybe that person is in charge of the team. Yeah, so the team could kind of form around either contracts or activities.
Services. Type of service. Installing drip lines.
Okay. Yeah, and then you'd have kind of an initial team leader would maybe invite people to join the team and then decide whatever initial structure they're going to use.
Right. So this is, the work comes in, somebody has to analyze the work, how much labor is going to involve, what materials do we need to acquire, and what is the price we're going to give to the homeowner.
Yeah. So
and find the labor.
Yeah. I'm trying to imagine that I was one of these farmers or one of these gardeners, and how would I want that to happen? I think like if I was like, oh, I am an expert on black soldier flies and I want to, put together a team to, install black soldier flies systems in people's yards, and we're gonna get all the materials, and we're gonna train people on how to do this, and we're gonna go out and do it. I think if I was organizing all that, I'd want to be able to say, hey, with this, I want to just use delegation. I want to be able to, just come up with the system myself, and then just say, okay, hey, you go out and do this with this homeowner, and it's up to you how you do it with that homeowner. Like I would kind of like to be able to figure out how that team was going to work if I was going to be the one who put the work into starting it.
Sure.
And not be told, oh, you have to do everything by consensus or something like that.
No, we wouldn't do that. So the consensus aspect is that you have to make it worthwhile for the other gardeners that are going to participate with you.
Yeah, exactly. Or people wouldn't join the team. Like people aren't being forced onto these teams, right? So that's why I say the team leader would invite people to join the team and decide on the initial decision-making structures. They might tell people when they invite them, oh, by the way, I'm going to make this team, democratic or something, and we're going to vote on everything, and if you're like, oh, I don't want to be on a team that works that way, then don't join that team. Right?
Or I'm not going to work with you because you won't listen to what I have to say.
Yeah. And that might happen, but yeah. I want to say hi to Mitzi. Somebody said hi. Mitzi said hi and gave us a little heart. So yeah, the chat room is working, and we have somebody who at least is watching a little bit. So.
Hi, Misty.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah. Cool. Anybody else out there, you can say hi to us, and we'll say hi back. All right. So yeah, I mean that that's kind of like the ultimate I'm trying to not say chaos. It's not chaos. It's
Distributed authority.
Anarchism. I couldn't remember the word anarchism for a second. That's weird. Yeah, this is the ultimate anarchism. It's like, people can decide how they do their own thing, and you can decide if you want to join that or not. That's ultimate anarchism. Anarchism is not a lack of rules, period. It's, people getting to decide what rules they use with their particular group or their particular project. And not having some overarching, everybody has to do things the same way. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we want the entire system to be open to everybody, but each step of the way, there you've got to have the procedures and the rules about how it's going to function. And you could say, well, I could do that better and go and do your own team. That would be fine. But if you're going to do it with the existing structure, then you need to follow the rules of that structure.
Yeah. Exactly. And then I had a little follow-up to this, like, how can this be optimized? What do you think you could do to support that?
Well, so that's that role of the researchers' best practices to keep track of what all the different gardeners are doing and say, hey, maybe we should consider going in this direction that Jane developed over here. And maybe if we combined what Jane is doing with what Joe is doing, those two things could be beneficial to all of us as gardeners.
Yeah, I'm just adding to the product developer accountabilities then to keep track of what the gardeners do, and I'm trying to think of the word, and collate that information. Is there a better word than collate?
To evaluate the results from different approaches.
Evaluate the results. Sure. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, to combine that into some information so we can figure out what the best practices are. So so the product developer provides best practices to gardeners. Yeah. Best practice information to gardeners. So yeah, they would, put out a report maybe just once a year, like, hey, by the way, of everybody, this many people are using this structure and this is how it's working for them. And something like that, whether they just have conversations with people or do surveys. That might be in their wheelhouse to do surveys. Let me write that down then. I'm going to write that down in parentheses. Take surveys. Okay. Awesome. All right. And then the very last question, we're almost out of time. We are at the last question for this section. What legal documents, systems, and agreements do you need to put into place that will allow people to start joining this?
Okay, so there's right now it's all informal handshake type stuff. But we have a letter to the homeowners that says this is the deal. You pay $100 a month, you get a tax deduction, and you can expect a gardener to come and do at least 4 hours work every month. And then it says, if you have any problem, you need to talk to us so that we can address the issue. And that's the only agreement that we have so far.
Okay.
And then the agreement with the gardeners is that the homeowner is going to send us a check and we're going to send you 95% of those funds. And that's one of the things that Carol and I were talking about earlier today, is that maybe we don't have to go any further than that until we find a way
Mhm.
to actually bring in more homeowners and have the need for something more sophisticated than
So,
just flying by the seat of our pants.
okay. So you're saying you still need a payment contract?
We don't have any formal contract, but
Okay.
I mean, the agreement is they have an expectation based on this letter
Uh-huh.
saying that
Yeah.
if they send us $100, they're going to get 4 hours worth of labor. And so that is a contract, but
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
not very sophisticated.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So possibly taking that letter and turning it into a contract or taking parts of it. Yeah, and so far you've just been having the homeowner like go to their bank and make it an automatic deposit to you. Is that right? To pay
Well,
that?
yeah, the banks will cut a check to LSI.
Right.
And that's we get the full $100. They could also go to our website and set up a periodic payment through PayPal.
Right, right. So, I mean, you could just build that into whatever, if you had a, like, if you were just using your website, it could just be built in there with that when they click to approve their payment, that's a contract. They get a kind of bullet list of
Sure.
what they're agreeing to when they click that. I mean, that's kind of a benefit of doing it that way. You're just making sure that they're clicking I agree. Yeah. So I'll just put in parentheses, could be built into payment method. That's one possibility. So yeah, you're saying that's all you need necessarily to get this started. But I mean, if you're going to have a board and actually form that board, then you're going to need to like incorporate, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So
that's down the road. We would want to hire the lawyers and get the formal organizational documents written, and bylaws, I think, is primarily the important part.
Articles of incorporation and bylaws. Yep, I think you need both. Cool. And then, well, and then you would probably want not only a contract with the homeowners, but also a payment kind of contract with the gardeners.
Right. And so right now they are subcontractors of the Living Systems Institute. So we can withhold our participation if they don't do it the way we want it to do it. They don't want to do it the way we want them to do it. But that's as formal as it is also.
Yeah. I think it'd be good to have it in writing, what you expect.
Yeah. Well, we expect them to show up for 4 hours.
Yeah.
Keep homeowners happy.
Yeah. Yeah. But to have them actually sign it.
Yeah,
would be good. Thinking what else? A payment contract with gardeners. You know, you're only going to get paid if you do these things. I mean, you kind of need people to sign something, I think, generally. Oh, and then systems. So around that system, you also need like them to fill out, what is it, a W-4 or a W-9?
No, we will send a 1099.
1090. Sorry, not W. 1099.
You know, for every gardener that earns more than $600, we'll have to send out a 1099.
Well, you send out a 1099, but you need them to fill out a form so that you have their information. I think you have to submit that to the IRS, right?
Possibly. I'm not there yet.
Okay. Yeah, I think I forget all the W's. It's a W form. There's a different one for independent contractors than for employees. So it's the independent contractor one. Yeah, I think it's a W-9 instead of a W-2. I think the W-2 is for like employees. Yeah, so you'll just need a system around making sure they sign the contract, they fill out the W-9. I mean, that's just for any kind of employment. And that's just about it, I think, and in the corporation documents. Yep. Sounds good to me.
As we become a formal organization.
Yep, that's it. And that's the end of this section. We now know your entire organizational structure.
All right.
At least in as much detail as we need to know now, because as we've said, the gardeners and eventually, the cooks, we don't know exactly how they'll fit in yet, but they will make decisions about exactly how things are done once you incorporate.
Correct.
So we just kind of need a general starting point. So yay, we did it. Awesome. Thank you. And thank you to the audience who joined us today, or if you're just watching after the fact, thank you so much for watching. And we'll be doing this again, so you can find a schedule of upcoming streams on my website, regenerativedynamics.com. You can also join my Patreon page, patreon.com/regenerativerevolution. There's a link below. You can support me for just $3 a month and join my little chat group, and I post, my behind the scenes stuff about, my work and how this is going. So you can kind of be a part of the regenerative revolution as an organizer of it, and maybe get involved, be a future guest possibly. If you want to be more involved, get involved and join my Patreon. So thanks, and we'll see you next time. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.